Let's go back in time today because, believe it or not, in the best game that JJ Watt has ever played so far in his Hall of Fame career, he almost single-handedly beat the Buffalo Bills while only getting 2 solo tackles and without recording a single sack. In that absolutely ridiculous performance, Watt recorded a whopping 16 combined quarterback pressures, including a bone-rattling 10 quarterback hits on then second-year starter EJ Manuel, as well as a game-changing pick 6 that actually ended up being the difference on the scoreboard. So, how did he do all of that? Well, since I brought it up, why don't we start with that pick 6, because to this day, it's still one of the best defensive plays you're ever going to see. It was early in the third quarter, and the Bills were driving in the red zone to try to take a 2-possession lead over Houston. The ball was on the 12-yard line, and it was a 3rd and 3 situation. Buffalo's in a gun trips look here, meaning 3 receivers on one side and an isolated receiver backside, but they quickly motion into this 2x2 look. Now, Houston is responding with what seems like quarters coverage on the back end, but the wrinkle here is that they actually have both their dime linebacker, Mike Muhammad, as well as their third safety, DJ Swearinger, both walked up in what's known by many coaches as a double mug look. They're doing this because they want to either A, dictate what type of protection the Bills need to use to handle this threat, or B, if they can't dictate that protection, they at least want to dictate how fast the ball needs to come out on this 3rd and short situation so that all of their DBs can just play fast and aggressive downhill, because they know if they can dictate that the ball needs to come out quick, there won't really be enough time to go over the top anyway. Now, in terms of how Buffalo can opt to handle this double mug look, they also have a few options themselves. They can either walk their running back up into what's called a sniffer position to plug that A-gap that Muhammad is lined up in, which will then free them up to half slide the offensive line to the left to pick up Swearinger and the DT and the edge rusher all together. But again, that's dictating the protection, and that would force them to leave Watt one-on-one with a right tackle, which Buffalo also might not want to do anyway. Or the second option, which Buffalo did end up trying, is they can full slide the line away from Watt and let him come free as a +1 off the edge on purpose, try to draw him up the field with that action, and then throw behind him to the running back in the flat as the hot receiver on this smash snag concept. It's a pretty solid plan, to be honest, and teams do this all the time. They allow a +1 off the edge on purpose and then trust the quarterback to punish it with yards after the catch. But when it comes to JJ Watt, he's a bit too smart for that. Watt knows that this running back is either going to be doing one of those two things, either plugging the A-gap in protection, or he'll be releasing as what's called a fast 3 to the flat, because those are the 2 most common ways to handle double mug looks, so he executes a pretty simple read here to counter that. Since the running back is releasing to the flat and Watt has nobody stepping down to block him, all he has to do is slow up and then slightly redirect himself into that throwing lane, and the ball comes right to him. Obviously, it's a freakishly athletic play to bat this ball to himself and take it back 90 yards for a score at almost 300 pounds, but the real eye-popping part of this is just the instincts and the awareness that Watt has to understand the defensive call, then understand how offenses like to handle that defensive call, and then of course freelance himself a little bit to get that pick 6. But believe me, beyond just getting crazy interceptions, Watt wasn't done dominating yet. As I mentioned before, he had 16 pressures in this game. For reference, that's more than Von Miller got during the entire month of September in that same season. However, just as important as the pressures that Watt got himself individually were the pressures that he helped create for his teammates. This is a 3rd and 8 situation in the 4th quarter, and the Texans are now leading by a touchdown, so the difference, of course, actually was Watt's pick 6 at this point. And on the previous drive to this one, Watt was also able to end that possession by getting yet another pressure on a stunt. So the Bills are keenly aware that they cannot block him at this point, but the Texans use that to their advantage because they know that the Bills know they can't block him. So they want to use that individual dominance to set up the rest of the defensive line for success. The Texans are once again in dime personnel here, likely in a man coverage look because Mike Muhammad is kind of mirroring Fred Jackson, like he's going to be matching him out to the flat. And DJ Swearinger is also once again prowling around that A-gap and threatening the center. He wants to bait that protection to slide his way and have the center's eyes go to him first, because on the opposite side of the call, the Texans also have a tackle end stunt dialed up over there. If you're familiar with Bill Belichickian terminology at all, they call this a me game up in New England. Obviously, the opposite is called a U game, and on a me game, the interior rusher penetrates the B gap first in order to draw that guard in, and then the edge is going to loop around to the inside to what is hopefully a wide open A gap. So Swearinger knows that the design of that stunt will likely work if Houston can run it 2-on-2, but if the center slides over there to help out and make it a 2-on-3, then it becomes a much tougher task. So Swearinger has to draw that slide and get the center to commit, which thankfully he does. Now let's talk about technique for a second, because the way that a stunt is drawn up in a playbook is not necessarily the same as the technique used to execute that stunt. There's a lot of fundamentals that go into this, and Watt is as good as anyone you're ever going to see at the technical aspect of a perfect stunt. He starts with a jab step inside and makes it look like he's trying to go for that classic club rip combo move to get the edge around the guard, like he does frequently. So the guard opens up his hips early and starts to get really vertical in order to match that. But watch what JJ does here instead. He's not trying to rip through the B gap just to rip through the B gap. He's trying to rip through so that he can get his hands on the back of the shoulder of the left tackle, which is Cordy Glenn. Up to this point, Glenn was just doing his normal thing in his normal kick set to take care of Whitney Merciless on the edge, like any left tackle would do. But now that Watt has his hands on the back of the inside shoulder, he's actually in a pretty rough spot here. In fact, both of these offensive linemen are in a rough spot, truth be told, because this guard is the only thing that might stop Merciless from looping around and blasting EJ Manuel, but he would have to peel off Watt early in order to do that. But if he does peel off Watt, again, because Watt has his hands on Glenn's back and is actively pulling him through so that Glenn can't turn around, well, then JJ would get a pretty clean rush as well. There's really no way from this position for this stunt to get picked up, because either Merciless is going to get through, or Watt is going to get through, or worst case scenario, both of them will, and that's kind of the point, all things considered. The value of an interior rusher like Watt or Aaron Donald or Calais Campbell or DeForest Buckner or even Justin Smith going back a decade or more, whoever you want to name really, their value is not just in what they can do individually as rushers, their value is in the pressures they can help create for their teammates on the edges on these types of stunts and games. All of that being said though, Watt was obviously brilliant in his own right at generating his own pressure back in the day, so I want to finish this off by showing him faking a stunt so that he can impact the quarterback all on his own. This is the very last offensive snap of the game for Buffalo. Again, they're still down by a touchdown at this point, and Watt has been a terror all day long. EJ Manuel is trying to drive the field to tie it up and push this thing to overtime, and he is just inside of Texans territory with a little over a minute to go. I want you to pay attention again to the technique and the deception that Watt uses here. Swearinger is once again walked up in the A-gap, so the Bills are going to be dealing with him by using Fred Jackson to pick that up if he rushes. And with the nose tackle here and JJ at a 5 technique, and then Brooks Reed out as a 9 technique, we've got another 3-on-3, meaning 3 blockers for 3 rushers. Buffalo is terrified of having even numbers because they know that they cannot block any stunts with even numbers whenever Watt is involved, so they're going to be reacting to the threat of those stunts extra hard, which Watt will then use to his advantage. You can see JJ shuffle a little bit with his eyes pointed to the inside as if he's waiting for a chance to loop around into the A-gap behind that nose tackle. And for reference, if you go back to earlier in the game, he was able to end another fourth quarter drive just moments ago on a very similar type of stunt where the Texans defensive line stemmed into their alignment late, and JJ was able to get home as the looper. So the Bills were very worried about that type of call being used against them again. But if we go back to that game-ending pressure, you can see that because JJ is emulating that earlier play and looking inside like he's going to loop again, you can see the guard immediately react and move his eyes to the nose tackle because he thinks Watt is leaving him again. So he calls out to the center that he's passing JJ off and that he's going to pick up the nose, but like I said, it's all a fake. Watt plants that inside foot and then works back into the B gap and edges the guard just as the guard is picking up the nose tackle, and so the center is left blocking nobody while the guard has to improvise himself into trying to pick up a 2-on-1 out of nowhere. Of course, with Watt's natural burst and bend, that guard cannot recover in time and never has any prayer of recovering in time, so Watt gets loose, and then EJ Manuel alters his footwork a bit because he sees Watt coming loose, and so the resulting errant throw while under pressure ends up getting picked. That interception ended the game, and Houston won by 6 points, the exact amount that JJ scored himself. Watt had a monumental performance in this game, one that both Texans fans and Bills fans would remember for a long time. But what truly made it special was all the impact that prime JJ Watt was able to have on a game without ever getting a sack. Whether it's pressures, batted passes, tackles for loss, or just stuff that doesn't show up in the box score at all, like how he sets up his teammates to make plays, JJ Watt truly was and is a one-of-a-kind player. And at least speaking for myself and other Texans fans across the country, we are all very lucky to have witnessed him play in his prime. And truth be told, we might never see another one like him again.